Mujhe bahut khushi hai aapko milkar. Today I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me. On October 29th of last year, this was my city, New York City. Hurricane Sandy hit that night with full force. It submerged large chunks of New York City, including Lower Manhattan, Staten Island, Queens, and Brooklyn. I myself lived on the 38th floor between 5th and 6th. So I was in Midtown. I was in the middle of the city. There was no reason for me to evacuate. And I lived on the 24th floor facing south, so I had a front row view. So I decided I would be safe, sit tight in my apartment, and wait out the hurricane. It was pretty amazing, the sight that I saw, with the wind and the rain coming through the buildings, and the sky lit up in these crazy colors of purple and black and gray, and it was at once awe-inspiring and also, gosh, a little bit scary. And around about a little after 8 o'clock at night, the sky lit up in this really ominous glow, and Lower Manhattan went dark, and so did my apartment. My lights went off, the weather channel went off, the internet went off because that's electrical too, and I'm thinking, what the hell was that explosion that I saw in the sky? So I picked up my cell phone to call my friend to see what happened, and the battery was dead. I had forgotten to plug it in before the hurricane. So I didn't know that that explosion in the sky was the transformer on 14th Street that blew and knocked out my electricity. So I spent the rest of the night worrying about what that explosion was and listening to the sound of the rain and the very heavy winds. It was a little bit of an unsettling night, but I made it through and I actually got a couple hours of sleep. I woke up the next morning and I walked to my kitchen to turn on the water faucet to start breakfast. No water came out of the water faucet. Turns out you need electricity to pump water up above a couple of floors. Since I was on the 24th floor, no water. So I decided to assess my situation. No water, no electricity, no refrigeration, no heat. It was kind of cold. I needed to find a new place to live. But I didn't know where to go. And it's at that moment that I realized that power is power. And without electricity, you could be in the middle of Manhattan and be completely cut off from information. I didn't even know what was happening in the streets around me. I didn't know what to do. So I put a few things in a backpack, and I went outside my apartment, and I knocked on my neighbor's door, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay, but I need power for my cell phone. I have to find another place to live." And he said, "I heard they have power in Times Square." I heard they have power in Times Square. So, as I said, I put my rain boots on because it was still raining. I put my raincoat on, and I made my way pretty safely to Times Square. And what I found when I was there was really bizarre. The streets were quiet. There weren't any automobiles on the streets beside emergency vehicles. Very few people, and yet all the lights were still on in Times Square. Lots of advertisements selling you everything. And with the desolation on the streets, I felt like I was in the middle of a Hollywood apocalypse movie. Like these are advertisements of some lost civilization and no one was left alive. And I thought, do we really need all of this stuff? In fact, one ad that was kind of two-story was for this luxury automobile, and it said, "Money to burn." And I'm thinking, maybe having a lot of money to burn is what got us in this trouble in the first place. And I'm thinking, what would I do with a luxury car right now? Because there were no cars on the streets. Do you know why? Nobody could get gas. In fact, a couple of weeks after the storm, taxi drivers were still waiting in line up to 8 hours for gas so they could just do their jobs. In fact, if you had a hybrid taxi, you were the man. So do you know how much a luxury car is worth when you can't get gas? About as much as a 24-story apartment with no elevator. Not a whole lot, because I lived in a 24-story walk-up. And it was at that moment that I was thinking, instead of this luxury car, do you know what I could really use? And this is for you guys. a bicycle. Because if you had a bicycle, you could get around. And my friends in New York City that had a bicycle after Hurricane Sandy, well, they were hot stuff. So I'm back in Times Square, and I'm looking again at all of these advertisements selling me stuff I don't need. And as Guruji said, we're drowning in stuff when what I really needed was shelter and filtered water and a hand crank radio. And at that moment, I felt a little bit like a Roman in the Colosseum. That maybe Times Square was this monument to our civilization's achievement, but also a symbol of its excess, and potentially, if we're not careful, a symbol of its downfall. Because having all of this stuff, although it makes us happy maybe a little bit for an infinite amount of time, it affects a lot of other people on the other side of the world. Some we don't even know, but you actually might. My heart broke in June of this year when I found out about the flooding in Uttarakhand that's actually not too far away from here. They received 4 times as much water than they should have. And because of that flooding, estimates are around 7,000 people were lost. Now, it doesn't fail to hit me that people that have contributed the least to climate change are now feeling it the most. And although New York City, with Hurricane Sandy, had about $60 billion worth of damage, and it pretty much lost the 20th century for a couple of weeks there, New York has the resources and New York can rebuild itself. But Uttarakhand is remote and it doesn't have as many resources. And I don't know how you make up for 7,000 people lost. I just don't know. So I submit to you that something needs to be done. A lot of something needs to be done. And the good news is that some things are being done, and I'd like to go through just a couple of them really quickly with you. So there's this organization called Ceres, and they put together an ad campaign I think is brilliant. In the United States, corporations are further ahead than our federal government. So corporations realized that tackling climate change is one of America's greatest economic opportunities of this century, and they got behind it. And you can't see here, but there's IKEA, and there's Intel, and there's Unilever, and Adidas, and they took out ads in all the major newspapers trying to push our government for tougher rules and regulations and policies on climate change. It's pretty cool stuff. And my favorite is Paul Pullman from Unilever right now, and he famously was asked what he would do if his stakeholders said, just focus on financial returns, forget about this sustainability stuff. And you know what he said? Get new shareholders. It's pretty cool and pretty awesome that he did that. So for those of you who like statistics, I put this up just to give you a couple of corporate examples of some things that companies are doing. I think that GE's Eco-Imagination Initiative is a pretty big one. They have 140 products that are environmentally friendly. They realized $105 billion in revenue to date. That's a lot. Walmart, one of the largest companies of the world, if not the largest company, back in 2009 asked all of its suppliers, all of its major corporations, of which there are 100,000, that they needed to be more environmentally friendly. So the impact that they can have is immense. And just to give you one quick example from P&G, and for Jadit, this is for you. Tide Cold Water, just one brand, saves around $60 in home energy use and has realized a profit for P&G of over $13 billion. So when companies can not only make money but also save money and do the right thing, they're going to do more of it, and it's not a bad thing. Also, the financial services industry is finally getting on board as well. And I'd like to show you some of these numbers because I think they're very telling. Bloomberg last year listed 240 sustainability measures. And of those 240 measures, they received 44 million hits by institutional investors. The same year, there was $3.74 trillion in socially responsible investing. By anyone's measure, the financial services industry is now paying attention to sustainability, and so are corporations. Excuse me, I need to drink something quickly. It's very hot in here, sorry about that. So, talked a little bit about corporations, I've talked about financial services, but I also submit to you today that this is not enough. It's kind of like just making a broken system a little bit better. And overconsumption doesn't work for us, And it's not going to work for the 1.7 billion people in India. So honestly, we need a new model. We need to switch from overconsumption to something that is less impact on the environment, but also meets real human needs and not just human wants. And I think a lot of those new ideas are going to come from this country right here. So I put this slide together in about 15 minutes. So I'm thinking, if I know all of these social innovations, there must be hundreds, if not thousands more in this country alone. I'd like to point out a couple. These two right here, Narayana Health and 1298 Ambulance, they provide better health care at a lower cost and quality in India. There's also, we'll be hearing from Azure Power later on, so I won't go through that. But these are all solar players in the solar space, providing energy for folks. Up here is National Instruments in Planet AI, and they're helping Indian dairy farmers get more milk to market without spoiling, so helping them to save money. And this is the Akash, and we were able to donate to 2041's eBase about 10 Akashas to provide higher quality education for students. Now, one of the things I like to mention to you guys is that these two, the fifth pillar, which fights corruption, and also Barefoot College, which trains widows and single moms for skills, these are the only two nonprofits. Everything else is for profit, which is pretty cool. So I think that the United States is known for innovation and entrepreneurship, but I'd like to take that and then kind of put it in your country as well and see what ideas you can come up with, because I think that you have a different perspective and you're going to come up with better ideas that reduce the impact and also meet human needs. And as I look out in the audience, I see innovators, I see businessmen, I see artists, and I see athletes, and I see spiritual leaders. And in fact, we need all of you, and the best innovations for how we're going to create a world that works for everyone is going to come from people with good ideas, people who can get those ideas done, people who can give meaning to those ideas. We also need beauty, and we need strength. Thank you.